A young student starting an exciting new chapter in her life.
This was a girl who knew how to look after herself, was well-travelled, had been in many countries before coming to Glasgow to study.
A chance meeting with a stranger who harboured a dark history.
He'd appeared in court on a charge of attempted rape.
And just 20 minutes later, a night that ended in a brutal tragedy.
It could have been the girl in the pink dress. It could have been anybody that night.
This Murdertown is Glasgow.
Keeping some secrets.
Killers are unpredictable. They can attack anyone at any time. Their motives are often varied.
And chillingly, in a number of cases, their reason to kill is completely unknown. Some can be organised and planned with meticulous efficiency, whilst others are more opportunistic.
They live amongst us in our towns and cities, and one thing sets them apart from the rest of society.
Their terrifying capacity to take someone's life.
Welcome to Murdertown.
Do you feel it in the air? Everything is changing, a world wasted by fear. Something wicked this way comes. Something wicked this way comes. It's been around since time began. A million times around the sun. Something wicked this way comes. Something wicked this way comes.
This is Glasgow, in Scotland. With a population of over 600,000, it has a rich history and culture that makes it the 5th most visited city in the United Kingdom. A popular location with young people, it's home to 3 different universities and has a bustling, vibrant nightlife.
Glasgow is Scotland's biggest city. It's very close to the country, so it's a popular spot for people going further afield, exploring the Highlands of Scotland. It's had a couple of high-profile events, COP26 in 2021 and the Commonwealth Games. So there's a lot going on and there's a lot to see and a lot to do.
People in Glasgow are very friendly. We're a very welcoming bunch and like to have a good time, enjoy having tourists in the city, a great place to visit, a great place to live. Yes, there's violence, yes, there's disorder, particularly, you know, Glasgow's very well known for its troubles with football, sectarianism. You know, there's gangs and there's crime, but there's crime everywhere, and Glasgow's a very, as I say, very friendly city, and as someone who's lived in Glasgow, it's never been a worry.
Probably similar in a way, maybe it's like Chicago in America. It gets associated in certain ways with certain types of crime, but that tends to be more sort of organised crime, you know, gangland crime. In reality, for the ordinary citizen, it's a very safe place, and for visitors, it's a very safe place to walk and to be. Obviously, a lot of drug-related crime, domestic violence, petty theft, the whole range of crimes that you get in most big cities, but most of these crimes have been on the decline in recent years. And Glasgow's kind of worked hard to create a new image for itself in the last couple of decades as a kind of friendly, welcoming city, a tourist attraction, rather than maybe the sort of stereotypes of the past.
I think you have to just be careful wherever you go, but I wouldn't say it's particularly any more dangerous than anywhere else.
The West End is home to the majority of Glasgow's student population, and after dark, areas like this are teeming with young people keen to embrace the city's vibrant nightlife.
Nightlife in Glasgow there's something for everybody. There's plenty to choose from, lots to do. Students definitely gravitate towards the city centre, Merchant City, towards the east of the city centre, and definitely the West End. There's plenty of student haunts there.
West End of Glasgow is probably the most affluent area of Glasgow. Property is quite expensive. It's got a real melting pot, a real mix of different types of restaurants and kind of experiences, and it's very, very attractive to a certain type of person.
In 2015, one of those new students arriving in Glasgow was 24-year-old Katherine Buckley.
Katherine grew up on a farm in Ireland. She was the youngest of 4 siblings. She had 3 older brothers. She came from a very loving and tight family. This was a girl who knew how to look after herself, how to keep herself safe, have a good group of friends, enjoyed a night out, and had been in many countries before coming to Glasgow to study.
She'd been to South Africa and Thailand and further afield. Latterly, she'd worked as a nurse in Essex and had decided to do a master's in occupational therapy at Caledonian University in Glasgow.
Karen was getting to know the city, studying hard, making new friends, and enjoying everything that Glasgow had to offer as sociable student.
Karen had moved to Glasgow in January to start her course, and she got a flat in the Garnet Hill area. It's a good spot for the city centre and also the West End. She'd only been in Glasgow a few months, but was really enjoying herself, was settling into student life.
On April the 11th, 2015, Karen and her friends had planned a night out, and they decided to try somewhere new. This place, the Sanctuary Nightclub on Dumbarton Road.
They got ready at home and arrived at the club at around 11:45 p.m.
Sanctuary is and was a particularly popular venue, popular with students and other people. It has 3 dance floors. It plays a lot of kind of contemporary music. It's a very safe venue.
A few miles away, a young 21-year-old man was also getting ready for a night out in the West End. And his life was about to collide with Karen's in the most devastating way.
I think the key thing was the fact that family or friends couldn't get hold of her on her mobile phone. She was always on her phone. They also became concerned and contacted the police.
You just want Karen home safely. We are desperate. She's our only daughter. We love her dearly. And if anybody have any information, please come forward.
Katherine Buckley was a 24-year-old student studying for a postgraduate degree in occupational therapy at Caledonian University in Glasgow.
On April the 11th, 2015, she went out with friends to the Sanctuary Nightclub in the city's West End.
It was a night out that she wouldn't return from.
On the night of the 11th of April, Karen arrived at the Sanctuary Nightclub around 11:45. A couple of hours later, around 1 o'clock in the morning, she told her friend she was going to the toilet. She left her jacket there, but she never ever came back again.
On the 12th of April, following their night out, Karen's flatmates woke to find she hadn't come home. With her phone going unanswered too, they raised the alarm.
They thought possibly she had met someone that they'd maybe decide to hook up and go back to that person's flat. But to all intents and purposes, they thought initially that she had gone back to her own flat. When she couldn't be traced and couldn't be found, they began to get concerned.
There comes a point where, you don't want to jump to conclusions too soon, but then maybe give her a chance to phone them or text them or turn up. Maybe she had too much to drink or more than they thought and had just left of her own accord. But then, of course, a whole day later, when there was no sign of her, no activity, no communication, they definitely worried for her safety then.
I think the key thing was the fact that family or friends couldn't get hold of her on her mobile phone. She was always on her phone, she was always available, she wasn't texting, she wasn't messaging, she wasn't using it for any purpose. Karen was also very active on the various social media channels regularly posting on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, various other avenues. There'd been no postings. They obviously became concerned and contacted the police.
My name is Jim Kerr. I was a police officer for 32 years, based mostly within the Glasgow area as a Detective Chief Inspector and latterly as a Detective Superintendent in charge of serious crime in the west of Scotland. Now, I've heard stories about other police forces that would say to those friends, come back in 48 hours, come back in 72 hours, but the Glasgow police took the report straight away, which was key in the first instance, to instigate inquiries. So that was the Sunday, and then the Monday morning, I took over the inquiry with the major investigations teams. Well, initially, in the Monday morning, it's basically, we've got a missing Irish student who's been at the sanctuary and left there at 1 o'clock on the Sunday morning, and she's not been seen since. It becomes fairly evident that this is completely out of character. She never went missing before, and we couldn't find any contra-indicator at all to suggest there was a reason for her going missing.
In order to try and track Karen's movements, the police quickly moved to gain access to the CCTV from the Sanctuary nightclub.
Normally, missing people are found, within a quarter mile of where they're last seen. So you basically want to go at the Sanctuary nightclub, where she was last seen, to search it, to interview the staff, seize any CCTV to try and work out where exactly she is. The Sanctuary staff were particularly helpful to us with internal and external CCTV, and there's nothing in there that we can see that has caused her to leave early. There's no any arguments, there wasn't any shouting, dragging or any of that carry on. It was just general stuff. But she decides, obviously, because she's just herself, decides to leave the club early, 1 o'clock, whilst her friends are still inside. CCTV shows her speaking to a man almost immediately after leaving the club. They're not affectionate to one another. It doesn't look as if they know one another, but there's a conversation between the two of them, and the two of them then make off up the street. She is not inebriated. She's not staggering about the place. She's aware of her surroundings, and they walk off out of view of the CCTV. He's the last person that we know of that is with Karen Buckley, and we need to identify him as a priority.
The police quickly established that Karen left the Sanctuary nightclub at around 1 a.m. and engaged in conversation with a young man before walking away from the venue with him. Identifying this young man now became the focus of the investigation.
So on Monday, the 13th of April, the police appealed for any information at all about her whereabouts, anyone that had spoken to her, and appealed for the man on the footage that she'd been talking to come forward to help with their inquiries.
It's essential that we were able to get as much media attention as possible, because it could be somebody sitting in a house, have got that vital piece of information, they don't actually realise it. This guy is not a suspect. He's the last person that we know of at that time to have seen Karen Buckley.
With the police's appeal for information ongoing, officers continue to trawl through CCTV footage from the area around the club.
I think we had over 2,000 hours of CCTV to go through. And the initial parameter was follow Karen Buckley. Where does she go? Once she gets further up the street, does she go right? Does she go straight on? Gather any CCTV opportunities at all. Public space, private space, third sector, whatever that CCTV is, let's identify it and start viewing.
Later that afternoon, the police got a breakthrough, courtesy of a tip-off from someone who was at the club that night.
That man was identified by a friend on that CCTV, given his address.
The name of the man last seen with Karen Buckley was 21-year-old local Alexander Pacteau.
We went to his address about 4:30 on the Monday afternoon and we didn't get a reply at the door. And we went back at 5 o'clock. We've actually had a key for the landlord to get into the flat and he's actually in there. He's in the flat at that point in time. He just decided not to answer the door. He says I was just about to come and speak to you about that girl that's missing. You need to have been in Mars, I think, not to realise that the police were looking for Karen Buckley that Monday. And then we see that there's tape and parts of a toolkit lying about the bedroom. The mattress is smaller than it should be for that type of bed. The place is smelling of bleach. And we then ask him, what is the scenario with this missing woman then, where is she? And then gives us an initial recount of the events, confirming that he is the guy in the CCTV, confirming that he took Karen Buckley in his car to give her a lift. They go to his flat where they have consensual sex. And she leaves at 4 in the morning and he never sees her again.
It was a seemingly reasonable statement from witness Alexander Pacteau, so the police moved on and continued their search for the missing girl.
This guy's no said, no comment. He's no said, I don't know what you're talking about. He's given a plausible explanation for what happened in the early hours of Sunday morning. And so we just treat him as a person of interest, but a witness nevertheless.
On Tuesday, the 14th of April, the police took the step of holding a press conference with Karen's parents who'd flown in from Ireland, appealing for her to come home safely.
We just want Karen home safely. We are desperate. She's our only daughter. We love her dearly. And if anybody have any information, please come forward.
They said, as we all suspected, it was completely out of character. The sheer mystery of it. Why would a clever, intelligent woman out for a night out with her friends, why would she suddenly just disappear?
Meanwhile, in order to assist the police in their inquiries, the young man last seen with Karen, Alexander Pacteau, agreed to come into the police station to be interviewed.
He's brought in and we take a statement off him. He's entirely cooperative, very comfortable speaking about it, very articulate, never a drop of resistance from him at all. He talked away in great detail.
You say you were in the Sanctuary nightclub on the Saturday night into the Sunday morning. When did you arrive there at the Sanctuary nightclub?
About 20 past 11.
Okay, and who were you with?
I was with 7 friends. They'd all been up to my house before we went to the Sanctuary.
At what point did you first see Karen?
I met her outside the Sanctuary on Saturday night, Sunday morning, at about, it was around 1 o'clock.
He volunteers this information, he's then allowed to leave, and at that time, he's simply a witness.
What throws, a credibility around about that story is we then have a person finding her handbag and her phone in the park, which is a natural route away from his flat back into the town. That then increases the credibility of that initial scenario, that she has left at 4 in the morning and somebody else has then attacked her or abducted her and dumped her bag and phone in the bin.
It definitely took a sinister turn at that point when her belongings were found and she wasn't anywhere near, and I think the hope that had been there definitely had diminished at that point.
At this point, the identity of the young man who'd been seen with Karen hadn't been made public. And this wasn't the first time Alexander Pacteau had been questioned by the police.
At the press conference on the Tuesday, the police allude to the interview and tell the media that they have interviewed Pacteau.
I remember I was actually working in another court that day, and I had seen his image as the gentleman who was helping the police with their inquiries, and straight away said to my colleague, that's the man we covered the court case for. I wonder what on earth he's got to do with this. I first became aware of Alexander Pacteau in 2014. At the time, I was a court reporter in Glasgow Sheriff Court and was aware of a man who was charged with making counterfeit money. At the time, he had a flat in Clydebank and he admitted photocopying £20 notes with a view to using it as genuine money. The police raided his house, he was caught, and in the end, he accepted that. At the time, he was given community payback orders, so community hours, instead of going to prison. Partly what caught our attention in the first place, because it wasn't the average person that you see coming through the Sheriff Court in Glasgow. A fairly middle-class person carrying out a not very middle-class crime, very unsophisticated scheme that he had up and running. We realised this was a boy who was privately educated. He was a first offender. He had no previous convictions and there wasn't really anything to find as such. So at that point, we knew we were dealing with somebody on the face of it who was in a court for the first time. But we later found out that he had already been in a courtroom before.
This wasn't the first time Alexander Pacteau had come to public attention. He'd appeared in court in 2013 on a charge of attempted rape. The woman was the same age as Karen Buckley. She was attacked in the West End area. He stood trial and was acquitted on the charge.
The woman who accused him was so concerned about him that she actually wrote to a government minister to warn about Alexander Pacteau having been cleared of the charge.
This previous allegation and his criminal record meant he was a compelling person of interest who would soon become the prime suspect in a murder investigation.
We know that he went to Pound Stretcher, Tesco's and B&Q buying caustic soda, chemicals that's used for local authorities to get rid of road vermin.
Three days on from her disappearance, in the early hours of Sunday the 12th of April 2015,
Glasgow police still hadn't found missing student Karen Buckley.
They had, however, located the man she'd been seen with on CCTV outside the Sanctuary Nightclub, 21-year-old Alexander Pacteau.
Pacteau, who had a criminal record, was helping police with their inquiries and, under questioning, didn't deny having been with Karen that night.
On the night of Karen's disappearance, Alexander Pacteau had met a group of his friends, 7 friends. They then travelled to the club, and it would appear that Pacteau, or at least one of the friends, had booked a booth and paid maybe around £250 for it. So it's a pre-planned, pre-arranged night. His car was parked nearby in Church Street near the club.
Pacteau's previous criminal history now made him a suspect as opposed to a witness, so the police undertook a forensic search of his vehicle, a Ford Focus estate.
He says he has taken her home in that car, so we need that car to extract as much forensics as we can, because that's the last place, except for the flat, we know that she's been in. So forensically we want to recover it to bolster his version of events, that she was alive and well when she left that car. is there blood in the car? Is there other types of bodily fluids in the car? And if so, whereabouts are they? We used a thing called a cadaver dog that identifies blood. It gave a positive reaction in the boot. And there was also blood in the front passenger seat of the car towards the door side, which would be indicative of the scenario that Karen had been attacked in the car and probably wasn't even alive by the time she got to Dorchester Avenue.
As well as searching Pacteau's car,
The police also searched the 21-year-old's flat here on Dorchester Avenue, just 2 miles from the Sanctuary nightclub.
They had all the different forensic techniques at their disposal when searching Pacteau's flat. They were able to find tiny microscopic particles of Karen's blood in the bathroom and the bedroom. He was then asked, obviously, about blood that had been found in the flat. And he then came up with a story that she had fallen and banged her head. This had been completely accidental, and she had then left.
The evidence the police collected from Pacteau's flat and car was overwhelming, and it was feared that something sinister had happened to Karen Buckley. But she was still missing.
As the days went on, the CCTV was able to identify him. We know that he went to Pound Stretcher, Tesco's, and B&Q, buying caustic soda, chemicals that's used fairly regularly by local authorities to get rid of road vermin. He asked a member of staff for advice when we were getting rid of bloodstains. He bought the barrel. He's seen on CCTV heading north in Glasgow on a road with a barrel in the boot through the windows of the Ford Focus, which is a significant piece of evidence for us.
The police had been able to track Pacteau's movements as he headed out of Glasgow in his car on Monday, the 13th of April. It was at that point they received a tip-off as to where he might have been going.
The key information was when they got a phone call from a friend of his to say that Pacteau had taken out a lease on a lockup, and they were suspicious about that.
And we got a phone call to say he's got a place at High Craigton Farm. He used to keep fireworks in it, and as far as I know, he's still got it.
The inquiry moved from effectively the West End of Glasgow, near where Pacteau lived, over to the farm near Mulgai on the outskirts of the city, and all the forensic teams had gathered there. When the police searched the storage unit on the Wednesday afternoon, they found a large plastic container which Pacteau had bought on the Sunday.
With the team that does go at the farm to open the barrel to discover Karen inside, obviously it was particularly upsetting for them. It was a scene that was going to be particularly challenging for them. Because literally, once we were able to work out a strategy about draining the barrel, you know, Karen was literally disintegrating, you know, in front of them.
In the early hours of Thursday, the 16th of April, police announced that they'd uncovered human remains at a farm on the outskirts of Glasgow, which they believed could be Karen Buckley. A few hours later came the announcement that they'd made an arrest.
We were able to locate him pretty quickly. He was in the city centre and he was detained. He didn't say anything.
It was very shocking. People were shocked. There was always been the hope, even amongst the police, that she'd be found alive, but fears were growing that she'd come to harm. And by the time the body was found on the Wednesday afternoon, I think the police had long realised that Karen, unfortunately, had been murdered, and probably murdered by Pacteau.
He was brought into Govan Police Office again. He then gives a version of events, you know, that he's picked her up and he's went back to the flat and she's burst her nose, and that's why the blood will be in the bedroom, and she became aggressive, and so I've had to hit her with the spanner, and he threw the wrench into the Forth and Clyde Canal, and he's panicked thereafter and tried to dispose of the body.
The evidence against Alexander Pacteau was overwhelming, and he was charged with murder.
From the very start, this completely shocked the city. People were, desperate to find Karen, hoped that there would be a good outcome. And then very quickly, when it turned from missing persons inquiry to murder inquiry, it was just complete shock, the whole city. Because it seemed there was more and more coming out. Every single day there was something, between evidence being found, her bag being found, and then they arrested the man who had been helping them with their inquiries very, very quickly.
This was a crime that shook this community. And on the 17th of April, the day after Karen's body was found, a vigil was held in Glasgow city centre, which Karen's parents attended.
The vigil, when I look back at it, I'm actually quite taken aback by how instant almost it happened. I'm quite amazed by how many people managed to be there near 24 hours after it was confirmed that Karen had died. We're in George Square and hundreds of people are there. To get that many people together in about 24 hours is quite phenomenal. There's a lot of word of mouth of people of every culture, every age, every background, none of which was a formal invite. They just saw it and went, I'm going. That's because there was empathy and just so much love. I think it's something I will never, ever, ever forget. Just the instinct of the people of the city, just to say, we're sorry, to be told, you don't need to be sorry, it's not your fault, and for us to say, well, Glasgow loves you, and, you're always welcome.
I can't believe so many people have put flowers down for her, and she must have been, really well liked as well, so, yeah.
How would you like people to remember Karen?
Outgoing, friendly, fun, just a really good student as well.
None of us will ever know the place they were at. And remember, they've been searching for their daughter in the parks and the streets of Glasgow. They've been looking for her. And yet, still, they felt able to stand among us and, oh my God, thank us. It'll always blow me away. I would sincerely hope that that was a nice time, a warm moment for them, and possibly a pause in their horror.
As this city mourned Karen Buckley's death, thoughts soon turned to Alexander Pacteau's imminent trial and how he might plead.
That kind of culpable homicide, manslaughter type scenario, didn't he mean to kill her? You then have to set about disproving that scenario. Very difficult to do.
He's never been able to offer a kind of rational explanation. Certainly, it was a completely motiveless crime. That if it hadn't been Karen, it had been someone else.
On the 16th of April 2015, Alexander Pacteau was charged with the murder of Karen Buckley.
As his trial loomed, there was concern from the police that the 21-year-old local Pacteau would plead not guilty, despite his behaviour on the 11th and 12th of April, suggesting his actions that night were premeditated.
He followed another woman earlier that night on CCTV. And she's probably one of the luckiest women alive. The CCTV shows him earlier in the night, outside the nightclub, following a girl. She's wearing a pink dress, and he's ducking in and out of parked cars as if he was surveilling her. And at the last minute, She flags down a taxi and gets the taxi and leaves. And he walks back down to the Sanctuary nightclub. It could have been the girl in the pink dress that night. It could have been anybody that night.
There was little doubt that Alexander Pacteau was guilty of the murder of Karen Buckley. And on the 11th of August 2015, he appeared at Glasgow's Crown Court to enter his plea.
There was a very strong circumstantial case against Alexander Pacteau from the time he met Karen to the time her body was found. But the discovery of the body in a plastic container which carried his fingerprint, it couldn't have got there by any other means, was the conclusive evidence, and I think made him realise, the game was up. He had to plead guilty, he had no other option. And his legal team, he would have a lawyer, but also a QC advising as well. Their advice would be to plead guilty, to take the option of a more lenient sentence, a discount which you'd be entitled to by pleading guilty. He's never been able to offer a kind of rational explanation. Certainly, it was a completely motiveless crime. The police have suggested that Pacteau was on a mission that night to kill someone, and that Karen was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. That if it hadn't been Karen, it had been someone else. The fact that someone could think that way always reminds you that there was a dark side to the human characters that perhaps we'll never get to the bottom of. The post-mortem showed that she suffered something like 13 blows. She met a violent death. She tried to fight for her life, and Pacteau had a number of scratches and injuries. So it was a violent, motiveless, unprovoked attack, and he wasn't really able to offer any rational explanation. The main version of events, as given in court by his own defence counsel, was that they had met outside the club, chatted away. He had offered her a lift home. They got into the car. He'd been drinking heavily. That Karen had said something that he had objected to. He had lost his temper, had picked up a spanner, and then carried out the attack.
They put Karen's body in the bath at the flat initially with caustic soda and bleach in the hope that it would disintegrate. But with the caustic soda, that doesn't happen quickly. And it wasn't happening quickly enough for him because his flatmate is due back at the flat. So he then decides that he's going to get this barrel, put her in the barrel, and take it up to the farm where he hires this outdoor unit and fills the barrel with Karen and the caustic soda. Uses several padlocks to secure the outhouse and then leave.
Following his guilty plea, Alexander Pacteau was sentenced for the murder of Karen Buckley on the 8th of September.
He tried to offer an apology through the court to Karen's parents, but the judge felt that there had been no remorse, that they were empty words.
I find it extremely difficult to find words appropriate to describe the dreadful crime to which you pleaded guilty. Karen Buckley was a young woman in the prime of life. She was a much-loved member of a close and united family. To you, she was a stranger who appears tragically to have accepted a lift in your car. In a matter of minutes, for some unknown and inexplicable reason, you destroyed her young life and devastated a family. Your killing of this young woman, combined with the extraordinary lengths to which you went to cover it up, display the actions of a callous and calculating man. In respect of the murder charge, there is only one sentence which I can impose, and that is life imprisonment. You will not be eligible for parole or release, and in view of such a brutal, senseless, motiveless attack on a defenceless young woman, the resultant punishment part is 23 years, backdated to the 17th of April. That's all.
And there's some criticism that he got 23 years, but they've got to remember as well that It's 23 years until he's eligible for parole, depending on his rehabilitation during that 23-year period, whether he's actually going to get out.
It's one of these very rare crimes of violence where it's completely random, completely senseless, completely inexplicable. There's probably little the police could do to increase levels of safety. How can you rationalise against a completely random act like that, a complete stranger deciding there and then to carry out this horrific act of violence?
It wasn't going to bring Karen Buckley back, and it wasn't going to provide much comfort to the family, to be honest with you, because they'd lost their only daughter. But it vindicated myself and the team and the efforts they'd made over many hours, especially initially, when the emphasis was on finding Karen Buckley, hopefully alive. It's always good to get vindicated at the court. For him pleading guilty is pretty unusual to that type of crime, but I'm not going to give him any credit for it.
The family had justice in the sense that it wasn't a prolonged investigation. A suspect was quickly identified. Karen's body was found. The suspect pled guilty and was given a life sentence. They didn't have the prolonged misery of many families where a loved one goes missing. The body may never be found, and quite often someone may never be brought to justice. It would be up to them to decide if they've had any closure on the case. It may be that given the nature of his crime, he might never be released, that the parole board may consider that he's an individual who could never be set free in civilised society again. If that was the case, it would certainly be justice for Karen's family.
The impact of Karen Buckley's murder stretched from here in Glasgow across the sea to the small parish of Morn Abbey in Ireland that for years she had called home. Although these are very different places, they were both profoundly affected by the passing of Karen Buckley, and they share the painful memory of her tragic death.